Hey folks, welcome to CTF Radio. I'm Adam D and I have with me Zardus. Zardus, you want to say hi?
Hello, everybody.
And we have a very fun episode today. So what are we going to be talking about, and who are we going to be talking about it with, Jan?
We are going to be talking about one of the kind of most formidable forces in Capture the Flag, and we're going to be talking about that with that very formidable force in Capture the Flag.
So we're not just talking behind people's backs. We're actually talking, directly.
Exactly. And we'll be talking, let's go on the street and see what the population thinks.
Yeah, we're talking about people, not just forces, right? We're not talking about ROP. We're not talking about ASLR. We're talking about people.
Yeah, and in fact, these people, you might say, form a parliament. And that is the Plaid Parliament of Pwning. Actually, fun fact, for the first maybe 6 or 7 years of their existence, I couldn't pronounce plaid properly. I always said plaid.
Oh, I remember that we used to make fun of you at UCSB for that.
I don't know. How are you supposed to know that's how you pronounce that word?
Because it's a word. It's a word that means things, man. That's how you know how to pronounce it.
Words. How do they even work?
I don't know. A common delusion, I guess. We all say that that's how you say something. So
exactly.
Yeah. So without further ado, we have 4 people from PPP with us. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell you kind of where they fit into the PPP story very briefly. And I'll also ask them, like we do.
We'll dig in further.
Exactly. Yes. And we'll dig in way deep into there. And we'll also ask them how they got into CTFs, because I think that's something that definitely people out there really appreciate hearing about, the different ways and different stories that people get in. So Tyler, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Tyler.
Hey.
So I joined PPP basically in the beginning, so in the fall of 2009, I guess. And yeah, I don't know, I got into CTFs because trying to think of the whole thing, but the short thing was that one of the other people who was kind of I gotta back up. All right, so when the CTF team formed, Brian Pack was the kind of the original founder, and one of his good friends was Andrew Weesey, and I knew Andrew a little bit through another club on campus that did computer stuff, and he knew that I did like computers and I did like lockpicking, and he's like, yeah, he's probably someone who'd be interested in this, and then he's like, well, we need a bunch of people to play in Seesaw because we need undergrads, so you should join our team. And I was like, yeah, sure.
Awesome. So your first CTF then was Seesaw? Do you remember? So what year was it?
It would have been Seesaw 2009.
Wow, awesome. That's
very cool. Yeah, that's actually, I wonder if the Seesaw people know that. They were kind of the sparks.
Yeah, I mean, so PPP played in, I think, 1 or 2 CTFs before that, some random Korean CTFs, but yeah, that was my first one, I think.
Awesome. So who's next chronologically? Maybe we'll go that way.
Tim.
Probably me.
All right.
Yeah, so I'm Tim. I was probably the 4th or 5th, I can't remember the count, like captain of PPP. But I think most notably for this conversation, I was part of the first batch of people that came in from playing PicoCTF. So I was one of the high school CTF recruits. So yeah, I think we'll probably talk more about that later.
Yeah, you got to hook them while they're young, right? That's awesome. And so what? Yeah, do you remember? So your first CTF was like PicoCTF. Do you know roughly what year?
2013.
Okay.
Yeah, the first PicoCTF.
Cool.
Yep.
Who's next chronologically?
They're both around the same time.
I think about
They're
the same
exactly
time.
the same.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So Jay,
Yeah.
since you've already been on, why don't you go first? So this is actually the first time we've had a guest back.
Sure.
So we're happy to have you back, Jay.
Yep, I was on episode 5, I believe. I joined PPP in 2016 when I was interning at CMU. Then I officially joined and became part of the team in 2017 when I joined as a PhD student at CMU. But I've been playing CTFs for a while longer than that, starting off a team in India and, rose up the ranks to be the top team in India, and then looked, where do I go next? And of course, there's PPP. I was like, yeah, I got to be there. And here I am. So as far as the conversation here goes, Sam and I were co-captains for a year, and yep, currently I'm the captain. So
Cool. Look at him.
Very
He's the
cool.
captain now. I've been waiting to do that for a while. So get that out of the way, and then we can continue. Cool. So Sam, what about you?
Yeah, I'm Sam. I joined PPP in 2017 during my undergrad. I guess like the single biggest thing like that got me into CTFs was PicoCTF. But I was already like generally interested in that area from like war games, little challenge websites like hacker.org.
oh
So,
yeah, hacker.org. That was a fun one.
Hacker.org. Interesting.
What a great
I'd
name.
never heard of it.
It's like not
I believe their registration process involves you writing a script to attack a game before you can even register
Nice.
or something. So that's their captcha.
Oh, and a formidable one it is. That's great. I think that means you're not a real hacker, Jan.
Yeah, I guess.
But to revoke your hacker card.
Never
You can turn it in
registered.
at the end of the
Damn.
episode.
Yeah. Oh.
That's great. Okay, yeah, thanks everyone. Really appreciate that. So then maybe first I think we can start at the beginning. So Tyler, you talked about it a little bit. So, you mentioned, so kind of what was PPP at the very beginning? You mentioned Brian had a hand in starting that. What was kind of their goal? Were they starting a big thing? Was it just among friends?
So I think the main thing, basically in the beginning, there was, so Brian Pack was doing research with David Brumley at CMU. And so also back in the day, so CTFs have changed a lot, but back in 2009, I would say like a third of the CTFs were Korean. And it was just much more popular there. So Brian was like, he's Korean, so he's like, I want to play in these CTFs. I should join like some Korean CTF team, and they'd have tryouts or something. I don't know how it works, whatever. And then he was, there are several other Korean PhD students in the research group, and he's like, maybe we should all like try to join one of these CTF teams or something. And they're like, let's see what like other people think. And then David Brumley was like, don't join another team, start one here, or something like that. I don't know. This is partially lore because I wasn't.
Hey, lore is the best. Lore and legend are the best type of
week before I came there. So, but yeah, so they formed a team. Plaid is the school color for CMU, even though it's not exactly a color; it's a pattern. Yeah,
I was going to ask that next, but I'm glad you addressed that right away. Jan clearly didn't know that. He's partly colorblind, so maybe he thought it was a color he just couldn't see. So I don't know.
Yeah, and then I don't know why Parliament of Pwning, but alliteration is good. So, so the first couple CTFs were like some Korean CTFs, and did pretty well in them. And then I joined. Either we played in a Korean CTF or the first one was Seesaw. I don't quite remember, but. So it's mostly a bunch of people from like David Brumley's research group, so a lot of PhD students and stuff at first, and then kind of some undergrads to play Seesaw, and then just
Awesome. So then size-wise, what was it like when you joined? Was it like 5 people, 10 people?
Probably like 6-ish people. There were like so me, Brian, Andrew, another undergrad, David Kolbrenner, and then some folks in the research group, Senkil, Junghyun. Fuck, I shouldn't.
That's
swear.
okay. It's explicit, so it's fine.
You can edit it out. Oh, okay. But but don't like forget people, and then it could be awkward.
No, it's
Ivan, Jiyoung. That's 8 people. That's about all I can.
Okay.
That sounds about right. So.
Interesting. Actually, and maybe it's a topic for later, but I see a lot of these groups start up, right? A lot of people email like, "Hey, we're starting a group in our research lab in our undergraduate club," and then they go for a couple of weeks, they get torn up in a couple of CTFs, and then it kind of fizzles out, right? So that initial spark needs timber. Is that the term? I don't know.
Close enough. That works.
But yeah. Anyways, like you guys played Seesaw. Did you do like incredibly?
Yeah, we did pretty well.
That probably helps.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's always been part of. I mean, it's tough because like a lot of people ask us, like, oh, how do you like train all your people to be good? And I think certainly people get better when they join PPP, but it's like most of the people who were already going to study computer science at CMU and knew they were interested in security, it's like already kind of self-selected a bunch.
Right.
So we've had a lot of benefits there.
So then what was your experience like, Tyler? So you came from this like lock picking and computers background. So like, how did that translate?
Yeah, I mean, I computer security was something I was interested in before. And like, I thought like being a hacker would be cool, but I think like a lot of people, especially, again, I mean, this is, God, so long ago, over 10 years ago now, it's like, especially then, people wouldn't think of computer security and hacking as like a legitimate field. So I kind of just like stopped thinking about that. And yeah, so like I had done not quite war game stuff, but probably like hackthisite.org or something. Like I had soft ice installed on my computer and didn't know how to use it, but I installed it and used the hotkey a couple times. I was about at that level before, like in high school and whatnot. And then it's like, I'd kind of dabbled, but
Yeah, I think soft ice has been a nice tool for a whole bunch of people around that time period to just get started, like a whole bunch of people who did game hacking around then, because soft ice was the recommended tool in like a bunch of tutorials that you could find online. So that's one of the other ways I got started with assembly-ish stuff around then. Hackasite and soft ice and TMK, cheat engine, bunch of these things.
Cool. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, it's interesting to think about, how like the distinct lack of resources, I think, to a lot of this stuff that, like, especially compared to like what's out there now.
Oh yeah, for sure. The kind of theme there of it's easier to, or a good position to start a CTF team in, or maintain a CTF team maybe when everyone coming in is already essentially ready to be dropped into CTF, right? I think it's a theme that my guess as we continue kind of exploring origins of these kind of top groups and so forth is going to stay pretty constant, right? Shellfish with their graduate student recruitment, right? And obviously graduate students in security probably are pretty up to speed as well. Or like you said, your group of your recruitment pool is undergrads at computer science undergrads at one of the top computer science schools in the world, right? That are already interested in security. So, probably RPI is something similar, reasoning. I wonder if there's, maybe this is a little bit of a tangent, we can cover it later. Like, I wonder if there's some route, for, let's say, I don't know, random university in, somewhere remote that's not like a top university. How did they create a CTF team that kind of maintains itself? Is it...
or maybe in the context of this, Jan, maybe we can try to get some understanding of how PPP was able to maintain, let's say, beyond the cycle of an undergrad or a PhD career, roughly.
And maybe that's a good transition also to kind of the second generation. How many generations of PPP would you consider there have been now?
Probably something like four
generations,
four.
Yeah, that seems about right.
Because 10-ish years, probably 3-ish years per generation, maybe.
Yeah, so like
that sounds.
Let's
those
say
are numbers. So.
First generation, maybe you lucked out, right? You had awesome kind of ready-made hackers. You tackled Seesaw, you did great, and that gave you the wind in your sails to kind of keep pushing forward. Maybe let's talk about generation 2.
Yeah, so that's actually still a little before my time, I guess. So yeah, I was going to say
Well, I can probably lead up to it. I mean,
Yeah.
I just don't want to talk for all of them, but yeah. Anyway, so so I think we actually had a lot of trouble at the beginning because we had kind of these group of people who kind of self-assembled because we all knew each other, so it was pretty easy because we kind of work together and everyone's kind of pretty good at what they do and whatnot. And then as we started playing more, we're like, okay, well, we should get more people. We should kind of build up a bigger team. And then, when people graduate, we want to keep this going. And recruiting people was actually really hard, especially, back then, it's like, they're like, well, what do you guys do? And we're like, oh, we hack some stuff. And that's cool, I guess. And then they go do join some other club or something. I think we did, in 2010, I think we had our first international trip or something in the spring semester or whatever. But, it wasn't it's not join us and you'll go to all these cool things. It's just kind of join us. And sometimes we sit around in this room for 48 hours and sit on the computer.
Yeah. How would you like to spend all weekend around a bunch of people staring at a computer screen, eating pizza? It's great.
Yeah. So we got a couple people from it was people who knew roommates or oh, this person's in my class that deals with security stuff. So we got a few people through that. I don't even remember. It's the next group of people who was so after Brian graduated, I was the next captain. He was doing a master's for 1 year, so we overlapped a little bit for the first transition that we had. And then after I left, there was 2 other undergrads, and I have no idea how we got them. I actually don't remember where Ryan and Max came from, but
Just showed up one day on your doorstep.
Yeah, basically. So it's kind of weird. We get a lot of people like that, where it's another good example of that would be Robert Yao, who's he was an HCI PhD student, and he just kind of showed up. And actually, the first time he showed up, it was a terrible CTF. Well, it wasn't a terrible CTF, but there were some terrible problems in the CTF. And then he was like, "This is ridiculous. I'm never doing this again." It was a stego problem that no one could solve. And then anyway, so he just didn't show up again for 2 years, and then he showed back up again, and it was just but yeah, it was where did this guy come from? And we kind of get a lot of people like that, where it's very lucky. But yeah, and then after that generation, then or that set of captains, then I think Tim was the next one.
So I think it was probably in your senior year of undergrad that PicoCTF was organized. So I don't know too much about the origin of Pico, but I don't know. Do we want to talk about that first, or should I just jump in?
I'd say just jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
We can circle.
Sure. So, yeah, I was at that time in my junior year of high school, and I had kind of like Tyler always been interested in computers, and I knew how to program in Java. I think maybe a little bit of Python. I don't remember, but I wasn't truly that passionate about it, and I actually thought I was going to go to school for physics or something. But then one of my friends approached me and was like, "There's this hacking competition for high schoolers that's being run by CMU," and I'm from the Pittsburgh area, so somehow my computer science teacher in high school heard about this and suggested it to us. So yeah, I guess it was me and 2 high school friends made a team for this. And leading up to it, I guess I learned almost everything that you needed to get started in Pico, which isn't much, right? But is I learned how to install Linux and how to use basic command line things. And I realized the week leading up to the CTF that it was really fun, and I was getting really excited for the CTF. And so when the day hit and the competition started, we were all gung-ho and ready to get started. And to our surprise, by the end of the first night, we were in the top 5 teams of the day. Nice. And so we weren't expecting to do super well or anything. We kind of were impressed at how well we were doing. And I think that just further motivated us to stick with it. And so I basically played hooky all week from school, kind of just like ignored assignments, which I don't think you're supposed to do, but I was just really excited about CTF.
I think as professors, we can't condone that behavior, but
as students,
I have done it. And,
exactly. We can say we've definitely both done that, where you just like, and that's one of the things I think I love about, CTF and security challenges is like getting sucked in and feeling that just like I've got to solve this, right? Which is amazing.
Yeah. Right. And I had always been like somewhat like competitive style of person. Like I really like playing in competitions. I really like trying my best to try to win something. And so, it was a long week, but by the end, we just barely finished all the problems and got third place, which was like the cutoff for prizes. And then really like the thing that changed everything, I think, was because we were a local team. We were able to, like, the PPP invited us to like come meet them and like kind of like, tried to recruit us a little bit, and it worked. I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to CMU and play CTFs. So yeah, that happened.
That's amazing. So slight aside, and okay, not to answer, but what did your parents think about you spending like a week straight hacking stuff on your computer? Were they like worried or were they happy? Like,
that's a good question. I don't remember too much, but I think they were mostly pretty supportive. I don't remember too much resistance there.
That's cool. Yeah, I was just wondering as a parent being like, well, I guess it's good, but it's not school, but it's still good. Like,
yeah. I think because it was run by CMU, it was kind of like, well respected. So I think that carried a little bit of credibility with it.
Laundered
like
that
sketchy
concept. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one of the sketchy Korean CTFs that I was talking about. Wait, is it?
Yeah.
That's cool. Out of curiosity, the two teams above you, was that TJHS and Dos Pueblos?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. We had actually completely unrelated to PPP, I guess. We had a similar-ish thing with the Dos Pueblos kids. They showed up in our hack meeting, and Adam gave them an incredible presentation.
Oh,
I think
man,
we've talked
it was
about
so
it
embarrassing.
at a prior episode.
I'll briefly mention it, but basically I wrote this. It turned it into a blog post that was like how to prepare for PicoCTF, and I'm sitting there lecturing to these high schoolers that had like got here because of like somebody in the IT department knew them, their parents or something, and so we're like, yeah, have them come, and I'm like, yeah, this Pico thing's coming up, here's some tools you need to know. And then I get to the end and they were like already talking about how they were writing Python modules and all this stuff, and I could tell from the questions they asked that like they already knew all this stuff. And so at a certain point I'm just like, okay, like there's not much I can do here.
I think one of those kids at that point had modded Super Mario Brothers into a 2-player game, and like all this crazy
insanity. I thought we were getting like complete noobs that I could just like show the basics and let them go, and just like they were very polite though.
Yeah, it definitely helps. I think PicoCTF was a brilliant concept in that regard, right? Because when you're young, I mean, you get. I was hooked just on the concept of DEF CON, right? And just being able to show up and it's a celebration of hacking for a weekend. But having a celebration of like this, like, actual very specific skills and techniques and iterations of that and practice.
So then maybe this is a good time to maybe stop a little bit and ask you guys what you feel like what is the role of the captain in PPP, and has that changed or evolved over time? Do you have defined, I don't know, roles or those type of things?
We kind of do. I mean, it's not really like a whole lot of responsibility, I would say. Like we kind of have like a treasurer who's kind of like the person to go to about, like organizing travel or refunds for travel and stuff like that. And then we have like the captain, who's the person at CMU that is like running the meetings and like organizing any like on-campus events. But other than that, there's not a whole lot to the organization, I'd say.
I see. So you don't have any roles like, oh, go ahead, Jay, sorry.
Yeah, overall, we're a very like you know, partially disorganized bunch of people, which seems to work out well. I mean, with the sizes that we're looking at, essentially, like it's a group of us who together decide, okay, this makes sense. Let's talk about this, or let's discuss this. Let's work on this CTF. The captain's role overall is just, if need be, to be the point of contact for things. Like, let's say there's a new student who came in and they don't know who to ask about something, or they're not sure if they should ask something publicly on our main channel on Slack. The captain would be the person they would just ping directly. It just simplifies and reduces the amount of effort it takes for someone to communicate to bring things up. Also, as far as organizing meetings, sure, the captains end up saying, let's have a meeting, and they make sure things happen, but the topics for the meetings and so on vary quite a bit, and pretty much all the members do have a pretty good say there. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, semi-organized is how I'd call it now.
Oh, that's great. And I think that's something that's super interesting for people to kind of learn and understand as we get to know more CTF scenes and get to see kind of behind the curtains, right? Because I think we've all heard of, let's say very different and varied approaches where people have well-defined roles of what they do versus kind of this more free-spirited, maybe more academic style of.
Yeah, and it's very easy to for kind of not necessarily misinformation, it's not that serious, but misconceptions could also not that serious to arise. People see, okay, PPP is rocking, CTF after CTF. They must have a super organized structure, right? And there were rumors floating around, like even when, I was playing and you guys were playing, and, it's like, yeah, in PPP, if you don't, get first blood after 4 CTFs, they just, like, kill you. Or something like that, right? Like,
that's true, actually.
I mean,
Tyler, is that a shovel behind you?
I think like, I'm always kind of surprised by how it kind of magically works out for our team, where we're like, it'll be like, some people are graduating and we're like, oh no, like, what are we going to do? We don't have anyone left. And then just some more people kind of show up and we're like, oh, this will be fine. And then they end up running things and then it all works out magically for the most part.
Cool. Do you have smooth transitions of power between captains, or is it like a political struggle every time? This is apropos of nothing.
So we basically have they're not elected, they're appointed in a very unofficial kind of ad hoc way. It's just like someone's graduating, like, you should be captain now because that makes sense. And then they're like, okay. And then,
yeah, I think fortunately it's always kind of been an obvious choice. Like, I don't think there was ever really a time where there were like, a lot of choices for like who to transition to captain next. And like a lot of times, like there were co-captains because there were 2 obvious choices and like they both wanted to be equally involved. So that was fine. So yeah, so far I think it's been just kind of an obvious choice.
So another takeaway here is, you get awesome people in and then you just let them do their own thing, right? You don't necessarily, I don't know, do you guys say, okay, we need a new web guy, you learn web, or is it just naturally arises? Yeah, this is actually, I think this is good information to have out there because definitely people have different impressions.
Yeah, I think the whole nature of bars a vacuum type of thing happens. Like, if there isn't someone who's good at web, somehow we're not solving many web challenges, and so someone's like, oh, look, I can try out these ones because, like, I've looked at some web things, and then they try it out, and then they're like, oh, I actually like this. And then, now they're the web person, right?
Back in the day,
so, like,
I can definitely, I understand that phenomenon. Back in the day, when I was still playing very regularly, Shellfish was probably famous for not solving any webs. So Mike Pizza and I decided to fill the vacuum one CTF. We spent 24 hours on a web 100 and failed. So, but we almost got there. I think if we had another 24 hours, we would have solved it.
I mean, I think a lot of it also is, especially as our team, I don't know, I don't know, it's hard to say that we grow at this point. We probably kind of just stay roughly the same size, but kind of grow. You know, a CTF happens, and if you are trying to solve, like trying to break into reversing or exploitation, and you're not already really good, you're just going to get sniped and someone else is going to solve the problem. And so you probably just kind of decide to do something else, which is not great. We should work on that, but
yeah, I think this occurred in the Shellfish world a little bit. Not to, you know, that's probably a topic for a different podcast, but I've definitely seen that happen, and people get discouraged, and then, you know, you end up with just like really old farts are the only ones that know.
Yeah, who wants to learn reversing when you have a fish who just like...
Yeah, exactly, and he just looks at it and...
It's great. He becomes a professor, has less time, and now you actually have others. And I think that's exactly right, because it can be super demoralizing to just be like, you know, if you come to the CTF and all of the easy ones are solved, it's just...
Yeah, these days we try to, like, especially when CTFs are nice and have a babies first, or at least like a distinguished intro category, we'll normally try to like not solve those unless you're a new person, or just encourage people who come in to solve stuff even if it's already been solved, just so they can, like, you know, go through stuff.
Yeah, it definitely, like, I think that is one challenge with getting new people into CTF is, like, you want to make it a fun cooperative experience that they're playing with people and, like, they're learning kind of how CTFs work and learning, like, tricks, but you don't want to, like, snipe every problem from them. Like, you want to give them that thrill of solving the problem for the first time, because I think that's really what's so addicting about CTF. So it's a tough balance to strike, I think.
And do you have you guys tried any or experimented with different strategies for that? Like having a PPP light team that maybe the new people are a part of that goes and competes?
I think the only time we've organized something like that is for Seesaw, because they kind of actually required individual teams. So I think other than that, I can't remember us like splitting teams up like that.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, otherwise it's the team playing together. As far as solving the easier challenges goes, there are times where, like, we decide, okay, we're not going to win the CTF, like, upfront before the CTF starts, and we're going to use this purely as a learning experience thing, and do a few live solves, you know, like, put up a, projector, and there's one person who's solving one challenge, and, you know, people are just screaming across the room. It's difficult to do these days because of the virtual nature of things, but it worked surprisingly well when we were in person, and like people who want to solve their own challenges, they'd be on their laptop solving stuff. But
have you tried
otherwise
this
with newcomers?
With Discord's video and screen sharing in a voice channel? I've seen some people doing this, and it seems to work fairly well.
I think the first time we really went in on Discord and a little bit of screen sharing was actually this year's DEF CON. So
interesting.
It worked pretty well, yeah.
I think it's also I think some of our like the current generation of folks use Discord a lot more.
Yeah.
So, and we used to be on IRC and then Slack, and then it's kind of split right now between Slack and Discord. Where
that's the cycle of life. Yeah. That's like exactly. I think everyone is undergoing this exact same trajectory. Some people, the really crazy people, had a Mattermost step or something that
Yeah, well, there are a couple there are a few of the like Google Wave and similar clones that everyone was trying to use, like when that was the thing.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember that. And Jan used to, back in the day, make Google Doc, like a master Google Doc that had links to all the other Google Docs for each category and challenge that would. And this is stuff he'd set up beforehand, and that's how we'd kind of collaborate. But yeah, I think that's a brilliant idea in the sense of trying to like one of the things that's so important about CTFs is being able to transmit knowledge to the people that you're working with, right? And so approaching a CTF with the explicit goal of, hey, let's approach this as a learning opportunity, I think is a super interesting thing that people should definitely think about.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I think Seesaw was always the best opportunity for people to kind of like grow and like improve at CTF, because it was like we would create separate teams and we would all try to qualify, you know, and then because we all had worked on the problems individually, like after the CTF, there was a whole lot of like valuable learning time there to like share, you know, what you learned and like how you solve the problems. And yeah, that was always my favorite thing.
That's cool. So then and I think the interesting thing that you mentioned earlier, Tyler, is you mentioned that you have kind of been, you said that size stays roughly the same, which means kind of some people are leaving, but new people are basically joining. So do you have a core, I mean, obviously you're clearly one of those people. Brian's probably one of those people, right? That's like the core OGs of PPP. How do you be active in CTFs for that long of time?
and part of it is, I'm going to say, I mean, I'm kind of don't so much. These days, I'm definitely a lot less active. You know, like I previously would play like every CTF, and these days it's probably like a few a year. Like, you know, play DEF CON and like CodeGate or whatever, and like a couple others if I have time. Yeah, I think part of it's good though, because like we have a lot of our new members who are excited and they'll form like a small team and play in a CTF. And it's kind of funny because sometimes like, you know, on our Slack, they'll just like post in like the general channel like, oh, we got like third place in the CTF. And everyone's like, I didn't know we were playing that CTF. And they're like, well, we were. And we're like, all right, like, good job. It's great. And it's just kind of funny because it's like no one even thought about that. But yeah, and then, you know, we have, like kind of like all the previous people who are captains kind of stay as, it's kind of stay on as like Captain Emeritus, whatever cabal member things.
Yeah, it's just what I was gonna say. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah. And then, you know, like, especially when we have like things like, you know, deciding, like setting up stuff for DEF CON, when it's in person and whatnot, you know, you got to like figure out who's going to travel there and everything. It's kind of a hard decision. And at this point, it's kind of like a group decision from like all the people who have ever been captains, plus a few other people who, you know, kind of would have been captain if it made sense to have like 4 co-captains at a time.
Right.
Stuff like that.
That's cool. So do you have any, I don't know, tips or thoughts on how to keep people engaged as they leave? I mean, is there anything you've noticed? Is it people who stay in the area so that they could still play in person? I mean, personally, I've tried to play one CTF while I was at Microsoft after I graduated from UCSB, and it was so painful. Like, just working by yourself when everyone else is in a room is just difficult.
I was just going to say, just on that last point, I think Discord has helped a lot with that. Like, personally, after moving away from CMU, I kind of like was in a CTF slump for a while because it's like you said, it's kind of harder to play when you're alone. But being able to be in voice chat with people and talking about the problems really kind of, you know, reminded me of when I was on campus.
Yep, same kind of thing. Like Discord is what we use to organize even preparing Plaid CTF, you know, making the challenges. Even if each of us are working on our own challenges, just having everyone online to, you know, rant to, if nothing else, is super helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is just as a whole, like, I guess our main strategy for kind of keeping people is that we're, in a lot of ways, I'd consider us like a social club. You know, most of the, like, we're all pretty good friends. You know, like we'd hang out if there wasn't CTF stuff going on and we'd, you know, do that, which is part of why, you know, we'll still kind of keep checking in and playing because it's, you know, we're like, oh, like they're playing, or like we'll meet up together and get food and play. So like we kind of have these days there's like a couple groups. So there's like a group in the like San Francisco Bay Area. There's a group at CMU. there's some folks in New York. I don't know if you all play together.
Fair enough. I think that's a good point, right? You're kind of, in some sense, creating satellite PPP clusters, right? So that those people can stick together. And yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, and maybe it's something that occurs naturally over time, but you're spending so much time around all these people working on the same things and working under stressful situations. So I'm sure lots of
builds a
friendship and insanity
bond, yeah.
exactly ensues.
And maintains the bond, right? I think that's what my guess is that's why teams tend to fall apart after graduating and so forth, is there isn't quite that bond, and maybe now it's easier with Discord and people not being able to meet very frequently anyways. So yeah, it's interesting. The really interesting thing, well, actually, maybe this is a good time to transition to the third generation or fourth generation of PvP in the sense of, I guess at this point you've been active for a couple of years. You've probably won DEF CON at this point. You have continued to kind of dominate the scene, and now you have people graduating and kind of going out. When's like the first time that a PvP player went inactive? Right, that's got to be like a sort of a sad sort of.
That's pretty soon, honestly.
Pretty soon.
Yeah.
How about a core person?
Yeah, it's kind of a no true Scotsman thing. Like if they're a core person, they would have never gone in.
Exactly.
But I think so the same year that like Brian and Andrew graduated from undergrad, there were a couple other people who were pretty corks, like they were kind of friends with them and stuff. And some of them, they pieced out, and that's the last we heard from them. And that's, it's kind of understandable and everything. And there were people who, like, we kind of expected would have returned, but they didn't. And yeah, but I think in general, part of it is also, I think these days we have a better feeling for kind of who is going to stick around, and that's part of how how we're able to like pick captains and whatnot. It's kind of like who is the sort of person who's going to keep doing this for eternity.
Nice.
At least,
yeah, maybe a little past them.
Cool. Yeah, and then but what about like? So Tim, you're in the third generation, and then I guess Brian, Jay, and Sam, you're in the fourth generation, essentially, of PvP, right?
Roughly.
Yeah. So, Sam, did you like your experience starting? Let's say, or Tim, you started when Tyler was still at CMU, right?
No, I played in Pico when he was at CMU, but I think he graduated before I came to CMU.
So, what was that like? Joining a sort of team with whose beginning you haven't even seen, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I don't know. It was kind of interesting because you would hear names thrown around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like I met Tyler already, but I didn't meet everyone in PPP. And so like I would hear the name Brian or Andrew or Ricky or like, these like hacking gods I would hear about all the time that like started PPP. And it took until we organized Plaid CTF or like we went to DEF CON in person for me to actually meet them and realize why they had the reputation they did. So yeah, it was interesting.
Cool. And Sam, what about you? Because and I guess Jay, you did an internship during maybe the third generation and joined on the fourth generation, right?
Generations are kind of fuzzy, but
yeah, they're fuzzy.
Yeah, so when I did my internship, there was practically no one from PvP still in Pittsburgh. So
wow, okay, interesting.
There were like, because everyone's off for their internships.
Taking you were there in the summer. Yeah,
exactly. The summer, like the entire team takes some time off.
Yeah, of course.
Because people playing CTFs every weekend, you need some time off every once in a while.
There's or at least there used to be a summer drought anyways, in the run up to DEF CON.
Right.
Several months with no CTFs. Not so much anymore with how many CTFs there are. But
These days there are way too many
It's
CTFs.
insane. I give my students in my undergrad class extra credit every weekend that they play a CTF, and it's insane. Every class I say, okay, and these are the CTFs this weekend. There's like 6. How is that? It's so crazy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Back in my day,
Exactly.
it was
Like
CTF every month, maybe.
maybe.
If you were lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
like when I first started, it was maybe 3, 4 a year, including counting DEF CON Quals as 2 separate ones. Maybe a little more. Yeah, maybe you're right, like 6 or 7.
Well, also, yeah, it depends if you start scraping the weird ones where you have to Google Translate everything. But
that was great.
Yeah.
My first time playing Secu inside, it was incredible. It was like Google Translate CTF. Oh man. Anyways, Jay, sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What
All right.
were you talking about?
I think we're getting at what it feels like to join kind of this long-running team. You know, what are the challenges and
Yeah, so as Tim mentioned, like there were a lot of people who, their reputation preceded them. Like I knew of them probably by their handle, didn't know, their real name, or, like even if I knew their real name, I hadn't met them in person. So finally piecing it all together when we met up, for Plaid or for DEF CON, I can't recall which. So that was fun, nice experience, and like it actually showed me again, as Tim said, why these people are who they are, how they got there in some sense. A large part of it, was just like these are people who are willing to spend a large chunk of time. And actually, if I recall correctly, I think I met Tyler right before I finished my internship. We met up for like an hour or something. He was just in town, and
for
the
those not
discussion we had then.
watching the video feed but listening to audio, Tyler shrugged. So maybe you guys met, but it wasn't such a strong impression. You know?
Right, it might not have been, but it was just for a really short time because we literally had a day or something in common and whatever.
I think I have an
yeah,
audio effect for this, but we'll skip that for now.
And I think the discussion was just like like practice, right? Like I had asked the question, how did all of these people, including Tyler, get to where they are? And the answer was practice. And now that I've been in PPP for so long, I have the same answer, practice. And it's kind of nice how like what was an answer that was harder to believe, where like, oh, these are these super talented gods who just got there as is, and slowly over time you can build up the knowledge, the practice, the talent. That was an interesting journey.
Yeah, I think the thing that really distinguished them was just it was clear that they really loved CTF a lot, and they had been in love with CTFs for years and had played so many of them that like you just learn so much by doing that. And I think that was kind of inspiring to see because it it helped motivate me to want to get to that point.
Yep, live and breathe CTFs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting. So there's I almost feel like there's a double-edged sword that can happen, right? Because I've also seen people show up and they're good, and then they participate in a CTF that the team does quite well at. Then they're like, yeah, but it wasn't my contribution. It was these hacking gods that pushed us through. Do you find that at all? Like, did you have to overcome this imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I definitely did. I think, like I was saying earlier, I think Seesaw was the best opportunity for that because you were forced to play separately from them, and so it kind of brought me back to what playing PicoCTF was like, where you were all on your own. Like you had to learn how to solve this, or you're not going to solve it. But then after the fact, you could talk to all of these like amazing CTF players about how they did it, and you would learn from that. So I think that was huge.
Nice. Yeah, that's okay.
The imposter syndrome is definitely a thing we have to fight with for, including beginners who join, for example, this year. When they're playing a CTF, uh, never is a CTF, just one person playing. I mean, there are exceptions, but uh, you know, it's usually a team effort, and it's difficult to distill out, how much you had contributed, and sometimes you need to, give these newcomers the, I can't think of the right word, but
Encouragement.
explain to them that they are learning along the way, that it takes time. They were contributing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
That's
and
interesting.
I've seen. I mean, I'm sure this is why you asked it, Jan. I mean, I've seen the same thing in Shellfish when the Pwn Devils. I took 5 or 6 people to UCSB to play in Hikon quals. I think it was 2017 or something, or 2016. Anyways, the year doesn't matter.
2008.
Yeah, see, it doesn't matter. But anyways,
18.
the point is that, like, I brought this group there who now, at least one of them's the captain of Shellfish, but at the time they were very new. And so I was like, okay, guys, what problems are you working on? Because I was doing some web stuff. And they were like, well, we don't really like want to work on anything because, like, Audrey and Jan are working on this problem. And I'm like, yeah, so what? Like, work on it too. And it ended up that they actually ended up solving it because the approach that everyone else was taking was too complicated and convoluted. And and I'm like, if you don't try this, you'll never do it. And they actually ended up doing it and getting the flag. And I think that was a huge boost for them to realize, like, hey,
that was HitCon 2017 because we got second place because of that.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah. We got, oh man, right at the end, Dragon Sack there. But yeah, without that, we would have gotten like 5th or something. It was very close.
This is how you can tell, I guess, we like CTFs too, is we remember stupid stuff like that.
Yeah.
The last minute.
I know.
They're incredible.
Oh,
Anyways.
Oh, that sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. This, it's something that I think our students really had to overcome. Slowly and painfully over a long period of time. That was 3 years ago. Now I think they really have accepted that, their core standing and so forth. But it takes a long time. Sam, did you feel this way when you first started? I mean, you have a unique position of starting in the era of already, the origin of PPP is obscured in mist and legend. They've been, at the top of the scoreboard for close to a decade, and then you start. Did you feel pressure? Did you feel, like you didn't belong? How did that feel as a fresh undergrad?
Yeah, pretty much like at the beginning. I guess like for me, like Seesaw definitely helped. It like was aimed at a lower level, like undergrad only. Smaller teams, so you had a chance to like work on all the problems. And I guess also like specializing in different categories helps to like, I guess like, so you can focus on learning like one specific category instead of trying to learn everything all at once.
So I think we have like another kind of takeaway emerging here, right? We had one takeaway that there's no real secret to getting awesome people. You get awesome people. Then
well, there could be.
No
they just
real...
could be not telling us, Jan.
That's true. The public position, the other public position is there's no like super.
No human
insanely...
sacrifices. The cabal doesn't murder an infant to get a new good player. So
no hyperstructure. You just get good people and you let them go and do awesome things. And an interesting thing here is you have to keep in mind, like, you have to give an opportunity, and awesomely Seesaw gives this opportunity for these new people to shine on their own.
Maybe,
right? and come back with that confidence.
The thing that kind of is coming out to me, Jan, and maybe everyone can weigh in and see if I'm completely off base, but it seems like you need to focus probably much more than people expect on people, not necessarily technical skills. Right, like you talked about communication and working with the people and recruiting new people and selecting the right, captains. And it's a lot of it's on people, not necessarily the technical side of things.
That's a good point. Other than like this live CTF that you're talking about, where one person, do you find that the technical skills come from within?
So I mean,
Go ahead, Tyler.
I was going to say, I mean, I think, for example, like when I became captain, it was not because I was the best at CTFs on the team, because I was not. It was probably because, I have, I'm more comfortable talking and doing people management stuff. And, we had, other people at the same time who, again, were much better at CTFs than I am. But, there's a big difference between they can go off and solve a problem and, we'll see. There's a big difference between they can go off and solve a problem and they can make sure that everyone's being productive and people aren't stepping on each other's feet and all of that. And I really think maintaining the team, making sure everyone's happy and doing good things. I mean, it's a lot more people management skills than anything else. I mean, obviously there's your team needs technical skills, or else you're not going to do well as a team. You can't just be very happy people and do well. But I think as long as I think most teams these days probably have a lot of really great people, and they just need to practice and kind of realize their potential or whatever, and then they'll be a good CTF team or a better CTF team.
I agree with all of that. And I guess also I think so we would run some sort of study session or lecture type things sometimes where we would teach skills about binary exploitation or reverse engineering or some specific topic. But I don't really think that is one of the keys to PPP success. I think it's much more about getting people excited and getting them to love CTF, because I think you learn most of the skills in CTFs just by being self-motivated to solve problems and learn them. So I think, keeping people excited about CTFs and getting new people to experience the thrill of them is really more important.
Yeah. And then as long as they are motivated to keep going through CTFs, they pick up those skills, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think this is something that we accidentally fought back against on just because of pure incompetence or being too overwhelmed. It's I when I started, I didn't realize what would be involved in being a professor and how much time you
Oh yeah,
lose
that's
on
a story
various
for
amounts of
another
things.
day.
Story for another podcast maybe. But the Pwn Devils, they're like, all right, Jan, you have a binary exploitation seminar, where you come in, we'll just do binary, we'll do pwning meetings and so forth, and I'm like, yeah, let's do it, and then it just never happened. And then for a while I felt super guilty that I was, letting them down and so forth, and but then they developed these skills on their own through playing CTF, so. And
I wonder, Tim, if maybe, at least I found as an educator, part of the benefit that comes from teaching those kinds of things is actually teaching yourself those things. You actually understand them at a deeper level so it's actually probably good for you in some sense. And I think it's, a lot of, I think new people maybe don't know where they should go or don't even understand the lay of the land necessarily. So it maybe helps out those people. But then, there needs to be that part where they eventually go and learn on their own, because there's no other substitute.
Right.
If you had to put a percentage on it, right? How much of that percent is you teaching them versus how much of it is them being so excited to play CTF that they force themselves to learn it?
I think I would probably go as far to say 90% is on them. I think the only part where transferring skills really matters is at the very beginning, when they need to learn how to read assembly language or just some core skill to even get into a category of problem. I think that's really where the education side of thing plays a role. But then after that, I think it's almost entirely self-motivation.
This is something How
do you feel about tooling too, or maybe workflow would be another way to think about that? Do you think that? that compares? Or
I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff where we teach people like the basic tools, like, you know, when we would do like a study session thing, we'd maybe go over like how to use IDA or GIDA or whatever, just to get Binary Ninja, just to like get an idea of like what it's like and the basics, because like those are super intimidating tools if you've never used them before. But you know, we don't have like it's not like we have like special workflows or tools internally that like everyone has to use. And it's also like, it's just kind of funny because like, you know, a bunch of people will do their own thing, and like it gets kind of annoying because it's like, oh, like, yeah, this is like my thing that uses Pwn tools for like Python 2.7, and you're like, what, you're still in Python 2.7? It's like, well, yeah, it didn't work with Python 3. It's like, well, now it does. You should use this. And like, I'm not going to do that. It's the middle of CTF. Like, give me a break. And it's like, all right, yeah, whatever. And
actually,
like a lot of like,
we had this. There was a rant that Jay maybe went on about this exact thing in our dropship AI discussion.
Python 2 and Python 3, it's all yes.
lifelong struggle.
yeah,
Again, exactly. We don't really have any sort of like prescribed workflows or anything. It's whatever people have organically learned for themselves, you know, figured out on their own. The basics, of course, you can teach, but a large chunk of these skills, I don't even know if they're really teachable, right? There, a lot of them we have learned ourselves, and we may not even know how to explain.
Yeah.
Like, sure, there is the portion as, you know, someone who likes to teach. I enjoy trying to find ways to teach things, but some of these things are just, oh, you tried it out for a few times. This, you know, you tried it on a few CTFs, and now you're comfortable with this way of doing things.
I absolutely agree with you. The way I phrase it often is security can be learned, but I don't know if it can be taught, right?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. I mean, Jan, we know a cognitive psychologist who was telling us basically a story where they studied people who are very experienced firefighters to try to understand what signals, because there'd be a certain moment where they would just like leave a building and be like, we've got to get out of here, and then the building would collapse like afterwards. And so they wanted to try to understand, because it's exactly this thing. If you ask them, they would just say, I don't know, I just know we need to like leave right now. And so by, you know, studying them, what they ended up finding was the signal they were using was the heat coming up from the floor. So if they felt heat on the lower part of their body, they, I guess, connected that somehow naturally to, oh, that means fire's in the structure of this building and it's going to collapse and we need to get out, which is different than if you feel heat radiating from different directions. So yeah, I think there's maybe a cool opportunity for future researchers would be studying these types of things, to think about what kind of things can we maybe study and teach. And I think it's, you gotta, in some sense it's about mindset, right? You want to be able to, you either need to teach or they need to adopt that kind of security adversarial mindset to problem solving. If they can't do that, it's not going to be successful. Yeah, go ahead, Jan.
Yeah, my approach to this, in the end, I mean, we've talked about it in several episodes, but just kind of a quick data point is to create my undergrad security course.
What's the name of that?
The name of it is Pwn College.
Oh, okay.
That's actually a URL.
I have bets going with people of how many times and how many episodes you'll mention it. So.
Oh, God damn it. But it's very relevant, because our idea was you teach someone the basics, maybe the basics plus, in lecture, and then you force them to learn through, you know, dozens of challenges that slowly get harder and introduce new concepts. It'll be interesting to see kind of longer term what effects that has. Maybe that's the right way of kind of training up so people can approach CTF. I don't know. I mean, the fascinating thing to me is that it doesn't sound like, you know, another confusion that kind of floats around these myths and legends about PPP is PPP sits down and they have an, you know, AI hyper thing that analyzes a CTF challenge and, like, you know, so forth. I've heard this quite a bit. I've heard it about other top teams, actually. It's, you know, it's not it's not unique to just, one team. It's like, well, these are the top hackers, so they must have some insane secret sauce. They like have, mayhem, and it solves all the CTF challenges or something along these lines. But it doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, I think it was always really funny, especially when we were working on some of those, trying to for a day job, trying to work on mayhem or something. And everyone's like, "Oh, you just use that for all your CTF stuff." And it's like, I really wish that was how it worked.
That was even remotely possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's just technically it's just a big gap, especially with the way CTF challenges are designed. But I think a lot of the stuff, like Jay was saying, especially, where it's the things that you don't really can't really explicitly pin down, where it's if you go to the top CTF players and you give them a challenge, you'll see instantly, they hone in on oh, well, the bug's probably going to be here because it's this sort of thing, or if you're looking at disassembly and you've very experienced, you'll look at a thing and you'll be like, there's not a bug in that function, and I'm getting a bit it'll be there's not a bug in that function. You're like, well, what does the function do? How do you know that? And you're just well, just look at it. There's no bug there. And you eventually build up that intuition. But I think the people who are crazy good and then solve stuff really fast, it's not because of tools. It's because of stuff like that where you've kind of trained intuition for exactly where to look at problems and stuff like that. And the only way to do that is just by solving a crap load of CTF challenges.
I lost audio for a second, so maybe I'm about to repeat something that you've already said. But I mean, I think a good example is the list machine. Stuff like insane challenges where it's
is that what?
But crazy challenges that really.
Or actually, so I had a kind of a different take on that. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, maybe Tyler and the rest, in the sense of obviously developing intuition for where bugs exist in software and developing intuition for understanding software is probably a good general skill. I guess where do you see that line switching over from more intuition on the CTF side of things, right? Because CTF is a game, and that's what I try to tell new people too, is you develop an intuition of where bugs likely are because it's a CTF challenge.
I mean, I think so I think anyone who's at the point where they're building up this CTF style intuition is probably at a good point overall. If they switch, if they leave the CTF field, which they should never do, but if they leave CTF at that point and go into kind of more normal security, I think, they're going to do great. But, those CTF heuristics and intuition things, I think a lot of them are CTF specific. I think some of the stuff again, going through disassembly and quickly deciding if something's interesting or not, something like that I think is generally applicable. But stuff okay, I was given this menu, whatever challenge, oh, the name might be a pun on this thing, or they didn't have this, or oh, their heap allocator looks custom, so it's going to be a stupid heap allocator bug, and they have this primitive in the thing, so it's going to be just that's a little CTF specific. But yeah, well, that's my opinion. I don't know what other people think.
One of the other things CTFs kind of teach you is the time frame limitation. You have 48 hours for the CTF. The authors hopefully have tested it to be solvable within 48 hours, and thus you have this time constraint, which makes them easier to solve, I would say, just because mentally you don't have this block of maybe it's not solvable. And when you're looking at a real world, some actual software for 0 day, which millions of people across the world are using, suddenly it feels harder because surely there isn't a bug that could be found that easily. And personally, it was a huge mental breakthrough when I realized that the skills I knew for CTFs kind of just translate over, other than the fact that no one's designed for the bug, hopefully, to be in there. and realizing that bugs always exist then brings back that mentality of the CTF where you're now willing to spend 48 hours or like an entire month staring at source code to try to find a bug.
So this is
Oh,
actually kind of shakes loose something in my head.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, looser than it already is. So going from CTF, right, specific challenges to real world security, and obviously there are CTFs that are like real world CTF, but even those are kind of halfway there. One path forward I've been thinking about from something like Pwn College, there's another mention, is to have a class where over the course of a semester, students choose a real world target, find a bug in it, maybe in groups, maybe alone, exploit the bug, submit that responsibly disclose, and then graduate with a CVE from a course. And at first, I had kind of the similar mindset. Yeah, but it's real world. Like, how would this really translate? And then, for me, it actually wasn't CTF. It was all the research we do here, where we have a project coming out, a paper coming out in February, where we just wrote basically a clever but fairly simple fuzzer, and boom, 60 bugs in Acrobat Reader or something, right? So it's I think the key takeaway there is that actually it's almost the opposite. A CTF problem will have one bug. A real world software is going to be riddled with bugs everywhere. It's just people haven't looked in the right way or something along those lines, right? I don't know where I was going with there in terms of discussion, but I guess part of it is actually a couple of different touch points. One is, you mentioned PPP started out in part in a research lab, right? Large part PhD students. Do you feel that research experience, in terms of, I guess they were researching presumably large-scale cybersecurity approaches, finding binary analysis and so forth, did that help the team's understanding of an approach to either?
That's a hard question. I don't know. I mean, I don't think, it's not like anyone was like, okay, well, we can like use our understanding of directionless weakest preconditions to help exploit the, I mean, it's kind of I don't think there's a direct transfer for a lot of the stuff, because I think a lot of it's more like, it's trying to think of a good way of putting this. It's kind of like, it's a fun way to blow off steam or like exercise slightly different muscles, where it's like, if you only exercise like your, I don't know,
Cross training, I think, is the term for that.
Fitness, but like but it's like, if you like your biceps, you have to do like you want to like balance stuff out, and it's like, okay, like
sports, Jesus, I have to be like
sport, yeah, I don't, but yeah, it's like, you can't like exercise only one thing, you have to like do it kind of both ways, and it feels good to like, oh yeah, like I got this academia stuff, and like we can do this great binary analysis, but then it's like, okay, and now like, how do we exploit ROP again? And it's like, it's kind of like different, like to be a well-rounded person and to like have to be satisfied in life, you need a little bit of everything.
That makes sense. Actually, Jan, I do have an example personally. So I can say that, like, I think doing CTFs honed your ability to analyze many types of things for vulnerabilities, right? Whether it's software or specification or something. And so that's kind of how the way we eventually kind of discovered or categorized execution after redirect vulnerabilities is Giovanni told me right before his grad class, like, hey, we found this really weird bug in Vika's research on logic flaws. It was like, had to do with redirection or something. I don't know. He just offhandedly mentioned it. And so I started looking at how in Ruby on Rails, how you do redirection. And then I realized like, oh, but it actually doesn't, when you call redirect, it doesn't stop the control flow. So you can very easily just call this redirect function and then have other stuff after the fact. So you do your auth check, and then you redirect in that auth function, and then known to you, it actually like falls through and continues executing. And so I was like, I wonder, could this actually even be a bug? Like, would anybody ever do this? So I like, crawled or like Googled for stuff on GitHub and found some things, and then we turned it into a research project to create a tool to automatically find it. And yeah, it was, and I know for a fact if I didn't have that security and that CTF, well, the security of course, but the CTF background specifically, like there's no way I would have like connected those dots and kind of put that together like, but developers will misunderstand this because they don't understand that it does this thing, and in these cases it can cause problems. So yeah, I think that's
right. But one thing that comes up there is noticing something and then pulling on that thread, diving down that rabbit hole, and that is something both researchers and CTFers love to do. And you'll notice that both are kinds of people who love to dive into details, who are willing to go to depths of understanding something that others would consider worthless. And it's when you dive that deep that you find really beautiful magical stuff. And yeah, so in that sense, yes, there is some transfer over between academia and CTFs, but nothing all that direct. You guys probably have more direct stuff than we've noticed in PPP.
It's tricky, right? I mean, I often get students, especially because I emphasize CTF so much in my class, like, yeah, but what's the point, right? So hopefully, maybe stuff like real world CTF is one answer. Maybe we should have another podcast episode in a semester, see how this experiment went.
There you go. Yeah, that's good.
I mean, I think one of the other interesting things about kind of watching PPP grow up or whatever is watching all the, like we have like people like Ned Williamson or Richard Zhu or, all these other, like, it's like, okay, I remember when they started and they had like imposter syndrome like everyone else and was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be so good at this. And then they're like, win pwn to own, or like, or Tim's another good example where he's got like, some public stuff on like Chromebugs, J2. I mean, it's just like all these people where it's like, I'm sure they could have gotten there without CTFs, but, I think the CTFs helped a lot. Yeah.
I think you definitely see a pattern.
Yeah. I mean,
CTFers then, moving into...
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if like this happened to one person, then it's like, okay, anecdote, but plural anecdote is data, blah blah blah. Like we've seen it happen enough times that it's like, and just so many people from our team that are now kind of in the real world doing real security stuff. It's like,
at least some correlation.
Yeah, I've tried to make the argument, but the data set's not big enough, like you said. But I've tried to make the argument that CTF in grad school is highly correlated with becoming a professor. But it's
a lot of confounding factors as well. So
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think like what is their team, Richard and Amat?
Fluorosity.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like they're a great example, right? They're two CTFers, boom, and like winning, doing incredible stuff.
Yeah.
Right. A really interesting thing, right? Like PPP and Shellfish.
Are they the Romeo and Juliet of the CTF scene? No.
Maybe. Without the tragic ending so far, unless the Tesla explodes.
Cool. And actually, so I think the one thing we haven't talked about yet in terms of PPP history that I'm super interested to learn about and know about is winning. So, Tyler, you were there at the beginning. So, I don't know, when did you first feel like PPP made it, or for whatever terms like that? Like, how were those early years?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's just so much kind of interesting stuff that it's like seared in my mind because it was kind of exciting at the time. But yeah, I mean, I remember like our first, it's like our first Seesaw, we went in person, and it was weird. They didn't have like it was Jeopardy style in the sense that there were a few, like it wasn't attack defense, but there wasn't a scoreboard. So it's like you go and there's like a giant text box and you write like you can like put in a flag or something if you got a flag, but some of them like you didn't get a flag. Like one of them was like write shell code for like Super H or something that does such and such a thing, and then you submit the shell code, and then like a few hours later they like judge it or something, and like they'll get back to you. So like we had no idea how we were doing, and they announced it's like it ended and we had no idea because this was our first in-person CTF. RPI is like they had been winning for forever, or like I guess 2 years or something, felt like forever because like everyone knew them and they were like the that guy, blonde kid in Karate Kid or whatever, before we were the blonde kid in Karate Kid. And then it's like, so like they're announcing the scores and like they announced third and it wasn't us. And we're like, well, okay, maybe we got second. Like, and then they announced RPI and we were like, wait, like that doesn't sound right because like I don't think we did that well because like some of our stuff we didn't finish everything. And then they announced us and we're like, yes, like we can go back to CMU and David Brumley's not gonna like kill us all for having lost. And that was super exciting. And then I think the next things after that was we went to we qualified for CodeGate, so we got to go to Korea, which was like our first international thing. So that was super cool. And we got second, which was like, we at least, I think the third place team was Intrepids, who was, at least like a DEF CON regular. And, they were like kind of not expecting us to have like come out of nowhere because they were kind of like, more old school people. And, they were super nice about it, but it was just like, having beat someone who was like felt like a real team, in the sense that like DEF CON is like the real deal, was super exciting. But then, it took us a while to qualify for DEF CON for various reasons. And then took us a while to do well in DEF CON and all that. And yeah, I mean, it's been I don't know when our first like felt like we made it thing was. I mean, it's kind of all incremental steps of like, winning Seesaw is great, traveling internationally the first time we qualified for DEF CON, first time we won DEF CON, right. And then after that, it's kind of all downhill. But
clearly you still love it because you didn't ride off into the sunset. You've been, you're still there guiding and helping and playing.
Not yet. Haven't ridden off the sunset yet.
No, you told people on this episode they can't. I was just thinking we need to make posters of Tyler saying CTF needs you, and like, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, but like, in terms of an approach to CTF, I think we touched on this actually on the Dropship AI podcast, maybe. Like, obviously it's not the hyper structured, this is your role. You're gonna sit here and you're gonna look at every packet and every PCAP until blah blah blah.
That's what you used to make me do, man.
But like,
this is what web people used to have to do during DEF CON finals.
Exactly.
I don't know. Look at PCAPs.
Oh, drink, or you can look at.
We'll see what PPP's sending our way, and maybe send it back. I don't know.
Exactly. But yeah, like, do you guys have like? I mean, normally you don't have a hyperstructure. Do you have like for DEF CON a hyperstructure? Is it just a vague idea of you're gonna, hit?
We
this
definitely
hard?
have more of a structure at DEF CON. I think there's a lot of stuff where it's like, I think in general, maybe this is my personal opinion, but especially when we started out, it's like everything we're playing for fun, and it's the only way that you can possibly sustain playing that many CTFs for that long. But especially for DEF CON, after winning it a few times, it's like we go there, like heads down, like we're gonna like this, we gotta win. So it's still not, we still try to keep things fairly flexible, I guess. Like it's not, but we'll still have something where some people should kind of know if they're going to work on like certain problems, or if they're going to be doing, like traffic analysis or something like that, and kind of commit up front, or at least like be more explicit about what problems you're working on. Because normally it's just very ad hoc, where people kind of step on each other's toes, and we try to avoid that more at DEF CON. I don't know what other people's experiences are. This part of this might be me being an old fart.
No, I agree with that. I think DEF CON is the one time where we definitely like make more of an initiative, or make more of an effort to make sure that every problem is being covered by enough people who like have expertise in that category. And we kind of like, try to guide each other a little more on like, you should look at this if you can right now, because, we need to try to first blood this or something. Just because I feel like the stakes are so high at DEF CON. Like it's definitely, I feel like it's when we get the most competitive. So.
Gotta win all that money.
Yeah, exactly. I wish there was something we could do about that, but people dump. I'll tell you what: if people dump a wheelbarrows full of money onto us, that will flow down into the DEF CON winners.
Trickle down.
Yeah,
I would not do that.
Trickle down CTFs. I love it. Cool.
Yeah, that is interesting to hear. So I guess it's also knowing when to be structured, when to be
right. And we try to prevent too much structure, and in terms of like the team size, if you have too large of a team, you require a lot more structure just for communication to flow freely, which is why typically at DEF CON finals we have some team size cap. It's slightly flexible, but we try to keep it at around a certain number to make it easier for information to flow, for things to be flexible, while still having enough redundancy, so that no one person has to stay up the entire time. Like someone should get some sleep.
How do you decide who
cabal
goes and who has to sit out?
Both sides. It's usually something about like who's played in the last year. Like are they active? And again, especially since so like. There are definitely some CTFs in the past where we'll say like, it's not a big deal if we win this one and this person's active and maybe they don't like they're not the best player, but we should send them because like they've been playing a lot and this will keep them motivated and they'll get better. For DEF CON, we do a little bit of that, but we try to make sure again like we're sending people who know what they're doing. It is nice.
You always leave a spot for David.
He does not. He'll show up. He does not play, unfortunately. But it is nice because compared to something like Codegate is just my go-to example, I guess, where it's like 4 people. It's nice because we can send a large part of the team. So a lot of the people who like don't get to travel get to go. And it's also a good way for kind of the older members and the newer folks to like get to know each other in person instead of just the online chats.
You always called DEF CON like the Shellfish family trip.
Yeah, man. Like that time that we drove down to Vegas and we had 2 Suburbans. One Suburban, the AC was busted. We only found out by the time we hit LA from Santa Barbara. And so like 4 or 5 of us volunteered. I was driving that. And I'm like, okay, we'll push everyone else that we can in the other one. And some of us will be in this one. And so I think at that point we were going through like Palm Springs with the windows all rolled down, blasting Lady Gaga and just sweating our asses off the whole time. That was terrible. Cool. Okay, so I think we're getting close to the end here. Maybe any favorite moment of your personal favorite moment of PPP? Could be winning, could be playing, could be when the Cabal first named you captain. Anybody have any thoughts? I mean, Tyler said his a little bit. I don't know if you'd want to change your answer.
I like winning.
Perfect.
Yeah, I guess I've been talking about it a lot, but I think some of my favorite moments were Seesaw because it was always fun to, especially when we could send multiple teams. It was fun to have, like, a few of us, like just undergrads, like take a trip to New York and then like compete all out as hard as we could. And even though like we weren't yet like the top players on PPP, like we had an avenue to like try to be the best in something, and that was always the best part about undergrad PPP for me. It was Seesaw every year.
Cool. Yeah, that's a very good point. Again, like this idea, you have to give people a chance to shine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so same, winning's fun, winning's addictive, but also like looking at how, everyone's improved over time. People who have just joined, a couple of years ago, and I've seen how their skills have improved. I've seen how my own skills have improved over the years, and it's really amazing to see how much just time and practice, people who are willing to, put in the effort can improve so much. It's really inspiring to see how much people are willing to put in.
Spoken like a future professor. Sam, what about you?
I guess like writing problems for Plaid CTF. So like after you play all these CTFs, you get all these crazy ideas, and then you implement them and force other people to solve your problems. It's a good feeling.
Yes, we understand.
Yeah, it is always really exciting when your problem, like your baby, gets solved for the first time, and you get to talk to someone who solved it. That is fun.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
yeah, that's a good point.
Cool. Anybody have anything they want to plug? Anybody hiring? Anybody want to plug a CTF?
Plaid.
Plaid, Pico.
Play Plaid. Play Pico CTF.
Yes.
What are the dates of Pico this year? It happened.
So Pico
There's
Mini
a-
just happened.
Yeah.
That was the month of October, and the main Pico is going to be spring of 21, and same as like Plaid is also going to be spring of 21. Not coinciding or not conflicting.
Plaid is always I since you guys were involved in quite a lot of Plaid CTFs and so forth. The first Plaid CTF, I feel like I've told the story before, but I'll tell it again. Basically, CTF used to be very different, right? You open up a Pwning 500 and it has ASLR on, and you're like, oh shoot, there's ASLR, and you go and you tell the organizers, do you know ASLR is on? Oh my god. We forgot to disable ASLR.
The first Seesaw that we played.
That.
The first Seesaw that we played that happened where they accidentally had like ASLR on or something. And I remember because Andrew solved it with ASLR, and everyone was like, "What? Like, how is that possible?"
Yeah, and I remember the first
Plaid
CTF. Actually, the first Plaid CTF, I stayed up for 48 hours straight. It was the longest I stayed up in my life. I woke up right before Plaid CTF started, drove to the lab, and I didn't leave until afterwards. And I drove home, which was a terrible idea because that's just awful. But yeah, I did not sleep. I was doing the whole when your brain just like turns off when you lose concentration for a second when you're super sleep deprived. That was
micro
awful.
sleeps or something.
Yeah, exactly. But the insane thing is I stayed productive all 48 hours. I was solving things throughout the whole time. It was crazy. But that was it stands out in my mind. Other than that insane thing. For being a CTF that pulled no punches, I think like Pwning 200 had NX and ASLR, right? Like that was very cool. I think that was the first CTF where I saw like, okay, everything is very, very real. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. And thanks. We really appreciate you guys coming on today. This was super awesome, and it's always good to, I think, like Jan mentioned, dispel myths and get to kind of know each other and know the community more, so that I think if more and more people play CTFs, I think that's the benefit to all of us, right? I think that the worst thing that could happen is if this like amazing tradition kind of dies out. So I appreciate Tyler, you keeping the faith, and pushing it hard. I like that. And so, yeah, thanks for everyone out there for listening and joining us today. I'm Adam D. You can find me on Twitter at Adam Dupay. He's Zardus. You can find him on Twitter at Zardus. Together we're CTF Radio. You can find us online on YouTube or Twitter at CTF Radiooo. You can send us questions through email at ctfradio@gmail.com, and we may use your questions on a future episode. So take care and happy hacking. See you guys.